Good day and welcome to my channel. My name is Rhod Mackenzie and today I want to talk about how the tariffs imposed by the US President Donald Trump have hurt the economies of the US vassals and fellow members of the G7 and has not harmed those leading economies of the BRICS. It means that economic growth of Germany, Japan and the UK have been the hardest hit, but tariffs have not impacted those leading members of the BRICS, China and India, and of course Russia wasn't tariffed at all, not its nuclear fuel, its wood or anything else it supplies. Now, Japan's economy has also experienced a significant contraction in the third quarter of this year. Country's GDP experienced a decline due to the impact of the US tariffs, which had a significantly adverse impact on the world's fifth largest economy by PPP, purchasing power parity, as it's a primarily export-oriented economy. However, a similar, albeit less dramatic trend is currently being observed in a number of other G7 countries. So let's examine how Donald Trump's tariffs have impacted the economic health of the collective West. Now, Japan underwater. Now, according to the latest estimates, Japan's GDP contracted by 0.4% in July to September compared to the previous quarter. Now, if you extrapolate and recalculate these for the full year, the decline would be down around 1.8%. Now, while this decline is smaller than the analysts expected, it's the first year in a year and a half highlighting the urgency of the situation facing Japan. Now, before I continue, many of you watching this video are not subscribers to my channel. So if you have enjoyed this video, then please do hit the subscribe button and also click on the alert bell so you get notified when I post a new video. Plus, if you want to support me, you can make a donation by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the right hand side of the video screen or by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link below in the credits. Now, next Tuesday on the 25th of November, I'm going to be doing a live stream. It will be at 4:45 p.m. London time, 8:45 a.m. New York time and 5:45 p.m. Central Europe time. So do join me, ask questions, participate. I'll love to see you out there. Now, Japan's economic decline coincides with a significant period of uncertainty as the nation anticipates the announcement of the formation of the new government and the spending plans of the Bank of Japan as it contemplates an increase in interest rates. Now, the GDP decline was primarily driven by a decrease in the net exports of goods and services, which were also affected by the uncertainty surrounding the imposition of Trump's tariffs. Now, it's worth noting that the previous quarter, immediately after Trump announced his tariffs on Liberation Day, exports rose sharply as companies preemptively increased their shipments to the US. Now, following what appeared to be constructive negotiations, Tokyo and Washington announced they'd reached an agreement, which the US said was mutually beneficial. And of course, this means that the US vassal Japan was not slapped around as hard as it could have been. So it needs to be thankful and grateful to Donald Trump for giving it not such a hard time. Now, the agreed tariffs on Japanese exports to the US will be 15%, down from the previously threatened 25%. Plus, Japan has had to commit to investing $550 billion in the USA. Now, there are a number of exceptions to this, and 15% seems reasonably tolerable, but still significantly worse than the pre-tariff period when they paid out. Now, Japan's fiscal policy will now take this into account when making its future decisions. Now, inflation is accelerating in Japan for the first time in a long period where actually you had deflation, and that's prompting concerns about the raising of interest rates. However, in such a negative environment, there's a possibility that monetary policy tightening could actually be put on hold, which would then threaten further negative consequences for the consumers and businesses in Japan. Now, should the Japanese government attempt to rely on exporters and a weak yen in order to offset the effect of tariffs, that's probably going to provoke a new wave of anger and belligerence from the Orange Man in Washington. Let's recall that back in the 1980s, the weak yen prompted a strong reaction in the United States, leading to the signing of the Plaza Accords, and that practically destroyed the Japanese economy and sent it into a depression that's lasted more than 2 decades. I mean, these accords effectively forced Tokyo to strengthen its national currency. So as the well-known saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now, the German multi-crisis. Japan's not the only country experiencing challenges in economic growth in the face of the new US tariffs. Germany, for example, has experienced zero GDP growth in the third quarter, and that follows a 0.3% decline in the previous 3 months. I mean, allegedly, Germany has narrowly avoided a recession, but the weak performance over the last 6 months raises question about those figures and the future. And if you believe the statistics coming out of the German government, then Germany's in a depression and it's downward spiral, and that things are about to get a whole lot worse, so do not believe the bullshit they're giving. Now, it was initially anticipated that the tariffs would have a greater impact on Germany sooner rather than later, so a modest rebound was expected in the third quarter. However, in my opinion, that is like everything else coming out of Germany and the analysts at the moment. It's wishful thinking, and it didn't happen. Now, current industry data indicates that there's numerous serious ongoing challenges in the German manufacturing sector, with production facilities undergoing significant downsizing and even some closures. Unemployment, which was previously a relatively uncommon situation for Germany, another commonality with Russia in addition to low public debt, is currently at a 10-year high and continues to grow monthly by tens of thousands. Of course, Germany's problems are not caused by the US tariffs. Well, not totally, but by the crazy policies of the German government, particularly their energy policies, which have forced many German companies to either close down completely or relocate to places with cheaper energy costs. I mean, they can't afford to work. I mean, Volkswagen, BASF, there's a hell of a lot of them that have just decided to go. I mean, Germany is facing a long-term challenge, which includes the decline of productivity that began back in 2019. I mean, the loss of Russia's energy resources and its market, plus the intensifying competition with China, has been its downfall. I mean, the 15% tariffs imposed on the entire EU are undoubtedly exacerbating the situation. Now, the situation in the not-so-great Britain, the UK, is not even slightly better. The GDP there grew by 0.1% in the third quarter. And again, if you believe those figures that the British government's telling you, by the way, I can sell you Tower Bridge for £1. I mean, tariffs for Great Britain, or not so Great Britain, as part of its so-called special relationship with the US, are set at a minimum of 10%. But that still hasn't helped the island kingdom. Or the islands kingdom, is to be correct. Now, it's noteworthy that what remains of the manufacturing sector of the country experienced a contraction of 0.5% during that period. Now, this decrease was only made so small and possible by the fact that the UK's share of manufacturing is amongst the lowest of all developed countries. I mean, the UK's positive growth is driven, such as it is driven solely by government spending, and its population growth is fueled by mass illegal immigration. I mean, in recent years, they've seen the GDP per capita stagnate and decline. I mean, in some respects, the situation is even more challenging than it is in Germany, and the situation in the UK is only going to get worse, as the current Prime Minister, known as Sir Juan Keir Starmer, and his calamitous Finance Minister, or Chancellor of the Exchequer as she is known, as the job is known anyway, Rachel thieves have absolutely no understanding of economics whatsoever and are doing their utmost best to bankrupt the whole of the private sector in the UK by death by 1,000 cuts from bureaucracy and regulation to make it impossible to employ people, and of course the sky-high energy costs brought about by the lunatic Mad Ed Miliband and the so-called climate change policies. I mean, this not-so-dynamic duo's modus operandi is that if it moves in the UK, tax it, and if it doesn't move, then tax it till it does. Like Germany, the UK is seeing an exodus of those who can afford to leave. Finally, Italy's also experienced zero growth in the past quarter. For this nation, which also places significant emphasis on industry and exports, the tariffs have also had a considerable impact. I mean, the American market for Italy is of significant importance, and plus, given the close ties between the countries, including the large Italian diaspora in the United States, and the love between the two, the economic downturn has led to a weakening of these ties, and it's essential for Italians to actually explore alternative market opportunities outside of the US and the EU to try and mitigate the loss of revenue. But of course, losing the Russian market hasn't helped. I mean, it's worth noting that Italy's market to access the Russian market has been seriously impacted by it following the sanctions. I mean, of the G7 countries, France is one of the rare exceptions to this rule, with its GDP growing by 0.5% in the last quarter. However, that was largely due to a 2.2% increase in exports, which is, don't know where that all came from, but certainly wasn't selling Rafale jets to the Ukraine. However, the sustainability of this recovery remains to be seen, and any conclusions will only be possible in another quarter or two. In the meantime, positive economic news could help mitigate the impact of the ongoing French political crisis, which seems to make Napoleon Macron even more precarious. Now, it appears that the leading economies of the BRICS, China and India, are operating as normal. It's evident at this time that the primary impact of the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump has been felt by the United States' closest allies, the G7. I mean, despite the belligerent orange man's rhetoric directed towards China and the dire warnings issued for India, where tariffs were set significantly higher than those of Japan or the EU, the impact of these on these countries' national economies has not yet been seen or realized. I mean, the People's Republic of China's GDP grew by 4.8% year on year, and its exports remain strong. However, it's premature to actually discuss the decoupling of the Chinese and the American economies. There's far too much link there. It's more probable that the Chinese goods have simply found other workarounds to export to the US by using third parties. Now, India continues to demonstrate strong economic performance, with its GDP growing by 7% in the last quarter. I mean, these figures already are approaching China's levels of 20 years ago, when its real boom, export boom started, an economic boom started. So it appears these tariffs have had a negligible effect on the country's development today. So there's wonder why Modi's not particularly bothered. Conversely, exporters may be reducing their price to maintain their strong positions in the US market. Now, in the coming months, the US Supreme Court may even decide that the Trump tariffs are not something that should happen. The justice give due consideration to the political implications, the damage suffered by America's traditional partners, as well as the extremely modest impact on everybody else, including competitors, could tip the scales in favour of repealing the tariffs. I mean, it doesn't preclude the possibility of the return back in some form or other. I mean, so Donald Trump's tariffs have hurt his useful idiots and vassals, but not hurt the BRICS. It's a bit like the sanctions on Russia that bit the EU on the arse, isn't it? Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.